Department quarterly update, Fire, Police, Civil Defense, Mr. Mahan.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Chief, for coming.
Yes, sir.
Are we up and running back here?
Are you ready to go?
Yes.
Are you ready to go, sir?
He's the
All
only
right.
person recording right now.
Thanks for coming, sir.
Thank you. All right, quarterly update for the Mount Vernon Police Department. I compiled some stats since we last spoke. Total calls for service this year, 10,760 as of 4 o'clock this afternoon. We are averaging 44 calls for service per day. That's roughly 44 a day. Major cases, we've had 142 full-on domestic violence cases and 26 sex offense cases.
You're fine, you'll have time.
Okay. 142 domestic violence cases, 26 sex offense cases. The officers of the department have handled over 440 car crashes. The department's made 3,416 traffic stops this year. This is year to date, by the way. We've issued 1,300 citations and 650 warnings. Our traffic program is working very well. With the traffic officers, we have one on days and one on nights now, focused primarily on traffic enforcement. Our day shift guy has been very diligent in working with our school zones now that school's back in session to keep people slowed down in our school zones, and he's doing a good job, doing a real good job. Some of the other numbers, totally this year we have had 167 total felony indictments through common pleas court. I don't know how many charges we've had through municipal court, but it's significantly more than that. Of these 167 indictments, 70 were non-drug related offenses. That's felony level crimes that are not drug related. We have had 97 total drug related cases pushed up to felony court this year. My folks are doing a tremendous job in trying to stem the flow of illegal drug activity in the city. We've had 9 felony 2s, 10 felony 3s, 5 felony 5s, and 5 felony 4s, it's easy for me to say, and 73 felony 5s, which is a lot of the possessions and small traffickings. Currently this year, in the amount of totals, we have seized 470 plus grams of methamphetamine off the streets this year. 842 grams of illicit marijuana, 3.8 grams of heroin. Here's a scary one. We've collected almost 50 grams of fentanyl. 50 grams of fentanyl. If that was pure fentanyl, that's enough to kill everybody in the city of Mount Vernon twice. Pure fentanyl. And we've seized approximately 15 grams of cocaine. The major we're seeing right now in all of our communities in the state, reports that I get from state labs in Mansfield, methamphetamine is by far the drug of choice, and fentanyl is a close second. It used to be they would lace the methamphetamine with fentanyl to give it a little kick. Now we're finding that a lot of people are using straight fentanyl, which is getting a little scary. That being said, though, this year our numbers are down from this time last year. We've only had 14 drug overdoses this year that we've responded to, and of that, unfortunately, we've had 3 deaths. So we've had 3 drug overdose deaths this year. We had about double that this time last year. And we have investigated one suicide call this year. We've also confiscated 17 guns from the different activities that we've performed, 17 firearms that we've taken off the streets, and we have seized approximately $2,500 in cash money that's pending the court system right now for some type of adjudication as to whether we get to keep that or we have to give it back to people. We do seize money when drugs are involved. And that's where our drug situation is right now at the moment. I think our numbers are down. I think our prosecutions are up, but our overall numbers are going to be down a little bit this year. Hopefully we're making a difference out there. I know my guys are working very hard to do that. And going towards that end, we had We just gave out a Bartlett Award, a Thomas Bartlett Award, to Officer Sarah Wheeler for outstanding service to the community. That's the highest award we have within the police department. She was nominated by another officer for her outstanding work with getting drugs off the street. So we were very happy to award her with an award for doing that. She's a great employee and a hard worker, and she's very driven, especially in the drug care sections. Finally, after a long 14-month investigation into the homicide of Paul Williams, who was found in May of 2022 in Aerial Foundation Park, my detectives secured a indictment for aggravated murder. The suspect's name is Terry Barker, who's currently incarcerated. That will be going to trial soon. That was a very long, very drawn-out, very labor-intensive investigation. Our folks put in hundreds of hours, man-hours, on getting the pieces we need to prosecute this properly. We did take a little bit of grief because we didn't talk about it a lot in the beginning when this all happened, and we had a lot of people that were asking us about why we didn't put this out. That was a combined decision by myself, the county prosecutor's office, BCI, the state investigators that were helping us to keep the coverage to this at a minimum to help the investigators. I know that's frustrating for some people, but it's an investigative tool that we utilize to help us. Okay. Currently, since you guys have authorized us to hire 3 new officers, we've hired 2. Andy Cotter started about 2 months ago, and Alexis Glob started a little over a month and a half ago. Both very qualified lateral transfers. We have one more that we're looking at in the pipeline, and we have one more person left to go. We have one open slot currently. Excuse me, we have 2 open slots currently. We have one in the pipeline, hopefully that we can get on board within the next month or so, and one more we're still looking for. We have had tremendous problems in getting qualified recruits to come to the city of Mount Vernon, but we're not the only ones. Columbus is down 300 officers. The Ohio State Highway Patrol is down 400 troopers. Just about every city you look at, our own Knox County Sheriff's Office is looking to hire several. Fredericktown's looking to hire several. Competition for good recruits out there is at an all-time high. Many factors weigh into that. But we will find the right people. We will find the right people, and we will not settle for second best if we can help it. I don't want to settle for second best. We want to find the right people to bring to the city. The last few we've hired have worked out outstanding. I think a couple of you have met some of them, and good people, and they're happy to be here. They love Mount Vernon. We're currently working on hiring the domestic violence sexual assault liaison for the grant money we've had. Ms. Nev and I have interviewed, along with Brittany Whitney, have interviewed several candidates. We have 2 that are very strong candidates, and hopefully we'll be moving forward with that soon. 2 new cruisers. We got 2 new cruisers a couple weeks ago, and they're currently being outfitted right now. So we'll have the 2 new cars in place. We had one car that was totaled in an accident back in July. One of our cruisers was involved in an accident. The officer's okay, everything was okay, but we broke a car beyond repair. We've decided to wait till next year to replace that within our current replacement cycle. So we're gonna hold off trying to replace that and just take the insurance money. Unfortunately, like many times, the insurance money they paid us for the car is not gonna pay to replace it, but it will help us offset the cost next year. Our PAC United program, we've had numerous events this summer with the PAC United program, thanks to everyone a few council members that have come out and hung out with the kids, played PAC United. We've had programs, we've had over 100 kids involved in our PAC United program. The great thing about the PAC United program is it has been entirely donation funded. We've received over $6,000 in community donations. We received a large grant from KSAT for the PAC United program. The entire program has been entirely community funded. It hasn't cost the city budget anything yet. So we look forward. We're going to take a break on it here for next month or so, let the kids get used to being back in school, and then we'll start some fall and winter programs going on with it. But we've had metal detecting, we've played dodgeball, we've had fishing trips, we've had archery, we had softball, not softball, kickball. We've done movie night at the Woodward Opera House. Our community partners at the Woodward, Mount Vernon Nazarene University, Paul Williams, or excuse me,
Paul McNeil.
Paul McNeil. Paul Williams is somebody else. Paul McNeil has been huge in helping us partner with the Mount Vernon Naz group. He's offered up his fields and his time and everything else. He's had volunteers come out from the summer program they have with the kids out there to help us with it, and it's just been amazing. We received I think you guys took the money in last council. We received a $5,000 donation from the Ohio Eastern Star Service Dog Program this year. They chose us to receive a $5,000 donation from them. We're going to put this aside and we're going to save it for next year, where we're planning on replacing one of our canine dogs, Leia. Leia will be 9 years old in March of next year, and she's starting to slow down a little bit. So before we wear them completely out, the handlers and the trainers we have give us guidance on when it's time to retire the dogs. These are high energy dogs and they don't have a 20-year lifespan. So we're planning on replacing her next year. With that $5,000 donation, we're a little bit of a third of the way to that goal also. We also have some fundraising projects that can help offset that cost a little bit.
Will that dog stay with its owner?
That dog will stay with its owner.
Actually, we're the owner, but you know what I meant.
Yeah, the handler. Well, what we have written in the canine program is when the dog is retired, the owner can buy the dog from the city of Mount Vernon for $1. More of a symbolic thing than anything else. The owner, and then that officer is responsible for the dog's upkeep and care. The city's no longer responsible, but also it gives a dog a forever home after that. So.
Chief, we're up against our time.
Yes, sir. That's about all I have. Does anybody have any quick questions
Any
for
quick
me?
Questions? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to my committee, the HR interns.
Hello, hello. You will be aware, we've had some email communication here recently regarding my request. I currently have one HR intern who currently works up to 10 hours a week. That's the approved hours. And I say up to because I want to make sure that I encourage all of my college students that school does come first. So sometimes I get 6 hours, sometimes I get 8, sometimes I do get 10. So that's always a plus. So I do have a request to increase the hours for my first intern up to 25. And I say up to just because I really don't know from week to week what our students are going to be dealing with that week, if they have tests, if they have school functions and such. And so I want to make sure that I encourage that and create a work-life balance for them right off the bat. I also have an increase request for intern number 2 up to 20 hours a week, and another intern number 3 for up to 20 hours a week. My main goal here, as you're aware, is to centralize the employee file system. 10 months ago when I was hired, we had them in the police department, the fire department, and all over the city. To date, over the last 8 months, I will say that we have centralized all of the current police officer files. It took a little longer just because those files are extensive. There's a lot of different training certificates and a lot of extensive information in those those files. We centralize them. I've got a list from the police department, what they need to have in their files versus the HR side of that. We combined it and made it a file. Additionally, we are scanning those documents, so all current supervisors have access to their subordinates' files, and all employees will also have access to their file electronically. So each person, it just takes a little time. BWC files, anything like that is also scanned. So I've reached out to you, and I'm grateful for the great response that I've had. I've met with many of you personally. I appreciate that. I know that there was some questions that were brought forward. I will report out to date in the last 8 months, $2,486.88 has been paid out over the last 8 months for the 2 interns, one from Kenyon College and one from Mount Vernon Nazarene. And that was from the spring semester and the summer semester. My intern from the spring semester, Miss Beck, she is reporting back. She started back today. So there was no training involved. She just kind of hopped back into it, and she knows where to go right back to it. So our next step is to do some current water, wastewater, and fire department files and get them right where we need them to be. So my request for the additional hours and for the rate to be brought up to 12 so it matches other internship opportunities across the city is to centralize these files, also to help support a much needed, stronger human resources department. And I'm not sure if there was, I know that there was another question regarding the background checks. In the past, I've not worked with background screenings for internship opportunities, just mainly for full-time, part-time, seasonal folks who work for the city. The company that I go through, Risk Aware, they do a very extensive, comprehensive background screening, 7-year criminal history. I get a lot back in that report. If we feel that, we need to do something on a smaller scale for our interns, I would like to make that uniform, not only for the HR interns, but I would like to make sure if you're an intern or an employee of the city, we would have to do a background, because I don't want to discriminate just because you work in the HR department. You have to get a background check, but I understand the sensitivity of files and all that good stuff. I will say that every employee that does work for my department, they understand the confidentiality involved in the information that they could see in a file, evaluations, disciplinary, such and so forth. They do sign agreements, and they are fully aware from day one that they will not go home and share anything that is in any file, if they were to see anything while they're scanning or centralizing files.
Can I get a point of clarification? So this is in reference to ordinance 2023-32. So in here it lists intern 1, 2, and 3, but we have 1 now?
We do have one. That was
So it's to
approved in
take
the
it-
earlier in the 2023.
So this would take it to 3.
It would take it to 3. I'm taking the number 1, which we have it approved 10 hours, and that's why I think it's taken so long. It's been 8 months, and we just got current police department files done, just because of the hours, and the student schedules and so forth. So each week is just different. If I was to increase the hours, and I do have the allotted budget in there right now, if I were to bring on and recruit these additional students, I would like to have longer hour spans instead of like 2 hours here, 2 hours there. It's just not enough time for someone to come in, go over to whatever department that they're going, grab the next stack and go through, because as soon as they come back over here and start going through a file, it's time for them to go home. So if I was to increase their hours, and if they can work, if they can give me 15 hours one week versus 10 the next, or 20, that's why I wanted to say up to. So I know what my budget would allow, but I don't, because I don't want to go over my budget. But it would, allow them the flexibility, and it would help me, and it would help them as well.
Questions?
Well, I have a few.
Okay.
You talked about your school system uses a contracted service?
We do. We do. We've hired somebody to come in and scan everything, and then it's a software where you can search in. So where are these being uploaded to?
It's a system called Power DMS.
So you have searchable abilities and stuff?
Yeah. Each supervisor will have access to all of their subordinate files.
So
I'm
would
not
the
sure about
company
contract
not scan
services.
them?
I'm sorry.
The company didn't offer the ability to scan them?
I don't have a company. The company that I do background checks is separate. But Power DMS, no, they're not a scanning system. They're a centralized system where you can go into, we can put our union contracts in there.
So you're just scanning it
handbooks.
to their system?
We scan it to their system. It's a cloud-based system where you can access that and you can look up anything in their file.
So timeline, you think, to get everything done you want to do?
That's a really good question, Tammy. Timeline, I wish I could tell you. Once all of our current employees are scanned and centralized, which we have approximately 180, now we got to go to former, I know that I'm working on a record retention plan, but I think that it would be very wise to go through all of the employee files that we do have and centralize them in an orderly fashion and scan so we can have those digitized and then get the appropriate record retentions in place. I really don't have an end date in mind just because employee files, they're constantly being updated. I can tell you at least, I don't think I'm exaggerating, Chief. I think it may be at least 3 out of 5 days a week I may be hearing from Diana and Cheryl over at the police department, sending me emails of updated training certificates that the police officers have gone through, just workshops and all of that good stuff. So we are constantly updating employee files so they're current. And so it's just an ongoing project. Now, of course, if I don't foresee a need in the future, I guess, I would definitely, obviously not have somebody, be here. But
Do you know how
I
much
think it
you
would
pay
be a
for contract
great
services?
thing.
Off the top of my head, I do not.
We're gonna take us to third reading, right?
Yes.
Maybe we can have another committee meeting.
Okay.
Background checks. We background check part-time people, you said?
We do.
And you saw my email, and I kind of mentioned it to Terry a little bit ago, and he was like, really, we're not doing background checks? I would think we have people handling people's files in the city of Mount Vernon. We would want a background check. I'm not saying kids aren't bad kids, but, we could be sued. Somebody says something about somebody's file, and it gets out, next thing you know, the city of Mount Vernon's sued. If we're background checking a lifeguard, I think we background, you said part-time.
I don't work with the plate or the pool. I'm sorry. I don't do the. Oh yeah. Yep. I'm working with Tom right now to do those seasonal employees. But yeah, past practice, Mike, I've worked in higher education for many, many years. We just did not do the student workers in employee files. Not that I'm saying that it couldn't be an issue. Thankfully, I've never had that issue. But, I would absolutely entertain that if that's,
Well, maybe by the next
needed.
meeting, you could maybe give us a number of what it would cost for a background check.
I can actually tell you that now. Our background checks, if you live in the state of Ohio, one state, it's going to be approximately $55, okay? And that's going to do a comprehensive 7-year search, statewide, national criminal, and a tri-county, okay? So if you live in Knox County, it'll be the 3 surrounding counties around Knox County. So if I was to do a college student, depending on what state they've lived in, so I'll take my current intern, she lives in Illinois, near Chicago. So it's going to be $55 for the state of Ohio because she's lived here. It's going to cost roughly another $55 in the state of Illinois. And I will say in any other additional state that anyone, regardless of where they've lived, it's going to hit it. It's going to ping it with their date of birth and Social Security. The Social Security trace is what does it. So I can give you a range, but roughly about $55 for one state, and it'll double for
And I
each
think that's
state.
good. Now, that's close. I had an idea. I did do some math on the numbers you had for your interns, roughly, if they work there the full hours, you're looking at, I come up with $14,000 to $15,000 a year.
Oh, a year.
Yeah,
Oh, I thought you meant for the remainder of this year. Okay, for the remainder of the budget. I'm sorry.
because I assume we're soon to be in the 9th month, so we'll be carrying this over to next year, and we don't know it ending, so I figured it for the year. We've already spent 2,400. I pulled my budget, and I talked to Terry, and I saw the line in the budget for interns was zeroed out, but Terry said we pick it up on another line somewhere else, right, Terry? So that kind of clarifies that. Maybe.
Yeah, when I was hired last year, I was just hired in October, so I was in those budget negotiations, but it was like soon as I got hired, hey, you're in a meeting and let's talk about your budget next year, but so it was just kind of like a guessing game because I was not familiar with the department or what I needed at the time. However, soon I learned right after what I really needed, and I needed those centralized files. I need to have access. I need databases. It took me a long time to have access to a phone number and an address for all of our employees because I didn't even have Civica at the time, but now I do, thankfully.
So can we do this? Can we just do another 10-minute meeting, or 10-minute committee meeting at the next meeting? And I'm sure there's more questions and we're gonna run out of time anyways in between meetings here and just.
Can I help answer any questions that you have now so I do my homework ahead of time? I know I've talked to many of you regarding that, and I didn't have any questions before today, but I would be glad to answer any because I want to make sure I answer all your questions.
I guess, we're dealing with taxpayers' dollars, and I know we want this partnership with the colleges. But I think it'd be reasonable to find out approximately what a contracted service would cost us and how quick they get it done and what a follow-up service would be. And I mean, you have those for your school as well, right?
Yeah, but it sounds like it's a different system.
I would
so.
definitely want to make sure that contracted services, see, I like to oversee that because contracted services, I'm not sure they're doing background screenings on their employees and so forth because they're going to have access to your employee files. I want to oversee that because I know the liability. I'm ahead of this department. I take that very seriously. So I want to partner with the local colleges, and it's extremely cost effective because if we are to hire an outside source, I'm just seeing more additional dollar figures. Just my thought.
All right, well,
And then if we were to
let's kind
hire,
of talk about that and get those questions answered for next time.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Okay, I guess we're gonna adjourn till 7:30. Thank you. Always wanted to do that.
It's good for Eddie.
We'll call the August 28th City Council meeting to order. Mr. Hill, you call roll?
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Here.
Mr. Hillier,
Here.
Mrs. Seaval,
Here.
Mr. Severns,
Here.
Mr. Mahan,
Here.
Mrs. Woods.
Here. The legislative session of City Council is now in order. We have Pastor Rick Gromlich here to do our invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll stand for the invocation, please.
You will, please pray with me. Almighty and sovereign God, we call upon you and bless your holy name. You are good and righteous and worthy of our praises. We thank you for this day, the gift that you've given us. We thank you for the breath in our lungs and the hands to work with. May we steward well the things that you've given for your glory, and may we use them to bless our neighbors. Thank you for the blessing of living in this land, governed by neither tyrants nor mobs, but by the rule of law. We thank you, God, for the liberty and the opportunity we have. Thank you for those who serve our community with diligence and with integrity, working to prosper our community so that we can bless those around us. Government is your institution, God, not ours. You created government for the protection and prosperity of nations, and we thank you, gracious Heavenly Father, for those who serve, who give them, we pray, wisdom, humility, courage. For as much as they labor to do what is right, they are honoring you and blessing others. We thank you, God, that our hope is not ultimately in this government or in our savings accounts or our well-made plans. Our hope is in the person and work of Jesus Christ, atoning for the sins of his people and giving them eternal life, and that Jesus will return again to set all things right and make all things new. This is our hope, our joy, and our comfort. Now may you bless this meeting tonight, we pray. We pray this in the holy and precious name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Council, in your packets are the minutes of the August 14th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So move.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. I see no petitions or communications. There are no committee reports. I do have a liquor control license. This is a C1 license to K&L CCC Incorporated, doing business as Long's Drive-Thru at 2 Mount Vernon Avenue. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact the clerk and he will get you in touch with the Ohio Liquor Control. I see no proclamations. I have one person wanting to speak to council on matters of city concern. Vicki Fitzgerald, if you want to come forward and give your name and address, please. You'll have 4 minutes. If you need more time, you can appeal to council for additional 4.
Okay, thank you. My name is Vicki Fitzgerald, and I live at 206 East High Street. The property next to us, 204 East High Street, has had excessive rainwater runoff coming from its north and east side since at least 2020. We've had to take defensive action to protect our garage, which was being flooded with every major rain event, causing washout under the concrete floor, cracking it, and causing major damage to our driveway. The neighbor behind us had to build a several $1,000 French drain to protect their home from that same water runoff. Now the city and the Historic Review Committee approved the demolition of their garage barn, which occurred on July 18th, leaving a large area of nothing but mud, which continues to spread out with every rainfall, dispersing more water everywhere down the alley toward the neighbor behind that house now, toward our garage and into the French drain. It has been 6 weeks since that demolition, and nothing more has been done on that property. I have left a message with Mr. Zick and as well as sent him an email, along with the same email going to other city officials, including the engineer's office, and I've received zero response from anybody. Mr. Zick and the city engineer are well aware of the water runoff concerns of neighbors to this property. When I wanted to build a small deck on the west side of my property, all of my neighbors had to be notified, and they had to give approval. That included the neighbor across the street who couldn't even see it. And yet, there is nothing that apparently needs to be provided to neighbors who are already dealing with the excessive water runoff from 204 East High Street. I'm waiting to hear from somebody as to what I can expect. Does the property owner have to do anything now to this mud pile? This is, by the way, a historic house, both houses. What is the plan now that the building has been demolished? What is the erosion and sediment plan now for this property, other than letting that water and mud run off onto everybody else's property and down the alleyway? The alley is becoming a washboard. As a taxpayer, I don't want to pay for you guys to fix the alley when the people who are letting the water run off are the problem. They're not doing anything. And let me say this, I hesitated to do this, but I asked the city engineer and myself, the neighbor behind us and the neighbor behind this house, met with the city engineer. And his comment to me and my husband was, well, if you guys were any kind of a good neighbor, you would tear up your whole sidewalk all the way down and all the way down your driveway and run a French drain for these people. Okay, I wonder what that would have cost me. And all we've ever asked is that there be some terracing on this property so that the water, we call it the person's last name and it's a river. And I have video, you'd be shocked. So there is no communication between city officials and those constituents who might be affected by decisions made by those same city officials. You would think that in a small town this would not happen. I mean, most people kind of know each other, see each other. I guess it's now not surprising then that no one on the west side knew that the city officials in this town allowed the levee to be decertified.
Mrs.
Water
Fitzgerald,
can be
You've
a
reached
big-
the end of your 4 minutes. Would you like
Okay,
to appeal
yes,
for an
please.
additional 4?
Yes.
Everybody okay with that?
Water can be a big problem, and one that should be in the forefront of every decision made by our city officials, especially when a town has a river running through it. It was said by the mayor that the levee was a priority, and we need to get this back on a priority list. My husband said, if it was a priority, shouldn't it already be on the priority list? Our town has seen flooding before, the worst of which was in 1959 when I was 6 months old. But there was also a flood in, forgive me if I'm wrong, in 1999, when the city did not prioritize the water runoff management on the east side of town. And the dirt water retention pond created by Jerry Baker, it breached, sending water cascading down Coshocton Avenue into Adams Creek and Dry Run, flooding huge areas of our town. Interestingly, I had been bringing this to the attention of City Council for weeks prior to that event. And the last comment I made to City Council at that time was, you are creating a giant water slide. Now our city is trying to revitalize the Copper Industrial Park. But if the Kokosing River floods because the levee breaches, I have a bet that property would be affected. So I'm asking the City Council, please help me understand what is going to happen with my property and what the property next to me, so that the floodwaters from that property are no longer going to impact me. But please also take care of business with the levee so the citizens of Mount Vernon don't have to deal with a catastrophic flood event. Fail to plan, plan to fail. And I guess, Mr. Zick, I have to ask why you never called me back or why you didn't respond to my email.
Well, I'm looking at an email. I referred your issue to the engineering department, and I'm being told that our development services manager responded to you in the middle of July and copied Mr. Hillier on that response.
I don't remember getting in. Who would that person have been?
That would be Lacey Blankenhorn.
Okay, Lacey answers my questions regarding whether the proper permits, but nobody is telling me what's going to happen.
That's one we
And-
asked about whether, when it went through historical district review and they did it online and they got the permit. They didn't meet, they didn't have the neighbors, and what they did is they did an online meeting and they approved the permit to tear down and, I don't know, approved a driveway, I think. But that's the email you're referring to, correct?
It must
Just-
be, yeah, so,
I mean, you've got it there.
yep.
So,
So
I
that's
mean,
about the permit. That's not about the question she has since about the water.
right.
So I will check in with the engineering department about the water. I think the one thought was less structures means more ground penetration of water. So the demolition should not worsen the stormwater issue. If anything, it should make it better. If it's not, we'll have engineering go out there and do an inspection like they normally do.
There's no grass. The mud is 2/3 of this room. That's what they left. There's supposed to be something that's put in place, but nobody is saying whether that's going to happen. It's been 6 weeks since this was torn down and there's nothing. It is a pile of mud. And we've had 2 major rainfalls and it just keeps sinking and spreading. So,
Check back in with engineering.
yeah, I'd like to know that something would get made. So, I just want people, I certainly don't expect as a citizen that every question I have or every whim I have is necessarily going to give me the answer I want to hear. But I really do expect that if I make a call, that somebody gets back to me and says, you're off base, or here's how we can help. And I mean, I've had the same problem with the mayor. And I've called him about a situation asking for a meeting and a tour. I've probably done 4 to 6 times. He's never called me back. That's since January. So this is a legitimate issue. I am a person, I am going to speak up. I can be told no, but I need to be told no, not just crickets. So that's what I had.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Are there any other persons wanting to speak on matters of city concern? Okay, we'll move on to the legislative portion of the meeting. Council, in your packets are tonight's agenda. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, I'll show it approved by consensus. We'll move to resolutions for third reading. Mr. Hill, if I could have you read each legislation by title and number only. We'll begin with resolution number 2023-61.
Resolution number 2023-61, a resolution approving the PCDD Comprehensive Development Plan as submitted by the Knox County Land Reutilization Corporation and approved by the Mount Vernon Municipal Planning Commission for 301, for 301 and 303 North Norton Street, parcel numbers 66-05329.000 and 66-02335.000, respectively, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Hilliard?
Thank you. I move to adopt resolution 2023-61, please.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Hill? Or, I'm sorry, any discussion?
Thank you. Council, I don't know what more can be said. We took it to 3 readings. I have not heard anything from anybody else. Municipal planning says it's a good deal. I think we need to vote and move on.
Mr. Hill?
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes. The resolution is adopted. We have no resolutions for second reading. We have several resolutions for first reading. We'll begin with Resolution 2023-71.
Resolution number 2023-71, a resolution of commitment of the City of Mount Vernon to the Sustainable 2050 program of the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission.
Mr. Hilliard?
I'd like to give resolution 2023-71 its first reading, please.
The resolution received first reading. We'll move to Resolution 2023-72.
Resolution number 2023-72, a resolution authorizing and directing the auditor of the City of Mount Vernon to make supplemental appropriations.
Mrs. Siebel,
Thank you. I would like to suspend the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take resolution number 2023-72 to its third and final reading.
Second?
there's a motion and a second to suspend the rules. Is there any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill?
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Siebel,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes. The rules are suspended. Mrs. Siebel,
I move to adopt resolution number 2023-72.
Second?
there's a motion and a second. Mrs. Siebel,
Thank you. Mr. Scott, we've got $40,000 we're going to talk about. $35,000
I got
and $5,000 about the dog that he
yeah.
was talking about earlier.
earlier, yes. So thank you, Mrs. Seavolt and Council, on item number 1 for $35,000. The Mental Health and Recovery for Licking and Knox counties has once again provided our probation department with this grant for $35,000. It is also in conjunction with Merit Court program that Judge Thatcher has going in his court and has had a great success. These folks have continued to help support this particular program and the staffing that actually run this program as well. Item 2, as you heard from the police chief earlier in a committee meeting, the Grand Chapter of Ohio Eastern Star Incorporated has provided $5,000 donated for the next canine dog that the department will be replacing next year. The chief in his comments has also indicated they have additional fundraising events to do because this is about 1/3 of the cost of what a new canine dog would be. And again, we continue to support, or like the support that these people do for our donations and help our police department and other departments as well. Thank you, Mrs. Seavolt.
Thank you, Mr. Scott.
any other discussion? Mr. Hill,
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Siebel,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
yes. The resolution is adopted. Moving on to Resolution 2023-73.
Resolution number 2023-73, a resolution authorizing and directing the auditor of the City of Mount Vernon to transfer certain funds.
Mrs. Siebel,
Thank you. I would like to suspend the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take resolution number 2023-73 to its third and final reading.
Second?
there's been a motion and second to suspend the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill,
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Siebel,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
yes. The rules are suspended. Mrs. Siebel,
I move to adopt resolution number 2023-73.
Second?
Mrs. Siebel,
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Scott, now we're talking about networking and 20 cents. We don't want to lose that 20 cents.
It's true. Don't let that get away from us. Actually, Council, it's better if we would just take items 1, 2, and 3 as a combined for a total of $25,500. And we need to actually replace a complete server that is one of our more central systems that we have, working with our consultant, the county IT department. We have a contract with them. And so we're putting those resources together so that we can get this new equipment in place. And then that leaves you with item 4. This is merely an accounting transaction. We've always had a special docket coming through from the court over onto the probation department, but it was entwined with one of our grant programs. And so what we're doing is a bookkeeping transaction to get that out of the grant program because it should not be there to begin with. And so we're going to reestablish it in the probation department. That's all we're doing here is moving it from one department to another for transactions purposes, and the net amount is $2,715.20. Thank you, Mrs. Sebo.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill? Oh, go
Can I
ahead.
ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Come way over
On
there.
number one of the sirens,
Yeah.
is that the tornado sirens?
Warning sirens, yeah.
Because I sent a message to Tom Collier last week, and tornado sirens around the country are becoming extremely expensive. People
Yeah.
aren't repairing them. He said they're not going to spend the money to repair those sirens once they wear out, because there's other ways of notifying people of disasters. And I do get complaints about the noise and the testing of it, but it's interesting to see that that's on here. And his comment was they're not going to, once they meet their lifespan, they're not going to replace it because it's extremely. First of all, there's not many parts to replace them, and secondly, they're very, very expensive if you could get them.
They are. Yeah, we have a maintenance program we have a provider who actually we contract with. Fortunately, we have very good service and on an annual basis. And so I think on behalf of, I'm not going to speak on behalf of those people who have more connectivity to it than I do, but we certainly have been able to do that, and the resources. Some years we use some dollars, and some years we use a lot of dollars. It just depends. I think the last one that we actually had, if I recall right, would have been out on Newark Road. Newark Road is where we used to have a fire station, and so at that time, while we owned the property, then we had the siren on our land property. That property got sold, privately got sold. So the church, we went to the church right next door and asked would we be willing to put it over on their property, and they agreed that that was okay to do as well. That would be the last major one that I can think of that we've done, but I'm not certain that we are not able to do repair works on ours at this
It's so
time.
costly.
It is.
Is it worth the
Yeah.
cost?
This is the first I've heard of phasing out tornado sirens. What's the
Yeah.
alternative?
Phones.
Phones.
So
Yeah.
the city would have to have everybody's phone number to warn them?
Actually, you have to sign up
It
for the
goes through-
Knox
it
County
goes through
alerts.
911
dispatch.
Yeah.
Okay.
But and tornado sirens only hit certain portions of the county anyway.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of portions of the county that you don't hear the siren, so they're looking at other alternatives to warn people for tornadoes and weather issues.
So if you have elderly parents that don't like to use a cell phone, you better be teaching them.
Yeah. Okay.
Question, sir. So, removing this to networking, you said we had a failure of a server, or?
We have a server that we need to get replaced.
Oh,
It's
okay.
still functioning, but we really do need to get this up and going sooner
Okay.
than later.
All right. Good to know that it's not quite failed yet. That's good.
That's correct. There's always tomorrow. Thank you, Mrs. Seville.
Anything else?
No, that's it.
Mr. Hill?
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier.
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes. Resolution 2023-73 is adopted. Move on to Resolution 2023-74. Mr. Hill?
Resolution number 2023-74, a resolution designating the depositories for the active, interim, and inactive funds of the city of Mount Vernon, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Seaval?
Thank you. I would like to suspend the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take resolution number 2023-74 to its third and final reading.
Second?
We have a first and second to suspend the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill?
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier.
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes. The rules have been suspended. Mrs. Seavolt?
Thank you. I would move to adopt resolution number 2023-74.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Mrs. Seavolt?
Thank you. Now, Mr. Scott, we're going to have some fun setting up something new.
Thank you, Mrs. Seavolt and Council. This is a biannual piece of legislation. Code Section 135 of the Ohio Revised Code does set out in the transactions for which active, interim, and inactive funds are all being housed through the city's investments and/or regular day-to-day funds. Our depository agreements expire today at midnight. And we already have selected who we will have for our depositories. I did a analysis with our providers last week, and Park National Bank, we will retain Park National Bank as our active depository. Active are those funds that we're using literally every day, practically, okay? Interim funds are those funds for which don't have quite as much activity, but we, within a 12-month period. And those would be interim funds. And then we have inactive funds, which would be much longer-term investment dollars that we have, and we have no immediate need for at the current time or within a 12-month period. So those are your three analyses that we work with. Park's going to also be in with our inactive and interim funds, as well as Star Ohio program, which is offered through the State Treasurer's Office of the State of Ohio. And we utilize all of those programs. So at this time, we'd ask for council to give consideration for the awarding of the depositories to Park National Bank and to Star Ohio.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hill?
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seavolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes. Resolution 2023-74 is adopted. Next, we have Resolution 2023-75. Mr. Hill?
Resolution number 2023-75, a resolution authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director of the City of Mount Vernon, Ohio, to enter into a contract with Ohio Power Company for the city to lease property located between East Vine Street and Lawn Avenue for a community garden and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Mrs. Keener?
Thank you. Can we call you Madam President? Is that?
Sure.
I move to suspend the rules and take Resolution 2023-75 to its third and final reading.
Second. There's a first and second to suspend the rules. Is there any discussion on the suspension?
So this is in regard to the community garden, which we've had several.
Just the suspension.
Just the suspension.
Yes.
Why are we suspending?
Yes. Which we've had several committee meetings on, and that is why I would like to suspend it, because we've had several committee meetings on this a few months back.
Mr. Hill?
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seavolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes. The rules are suspended. Mrs. Keener?
I move to adopt Resolution 2023-75.
Second. Mrs. Keener?
I think that we had all of our questions answered. We had several longer than necessary committee meetings, and this has been a while in the works. It took us a bit to hear from AEP and get everything meshed together, but overall, there was a very positive response to this, and I think it will be good for the community. Thank you.
Mr. Hillier?
If I could, and you may have answered this before, but for the record, they said they were gonna fence in the property.
That's still,
Who's paying for that?
They are.
they would.
The cities, we're adding water, correct? That means we'll have an expense there bringing a water line to them.
Yeah, we got quoted about $1,800 in materials. We're working with United Way to see if they have any resources for that. We run water to the Arch Park Community Garden as well.
And then upkeep, mowing, and weed eating, is that up to them or us?
Them.
And then we'll follow up to make sure they do it. Thank you.
I would note that we're going to enter a contract with them for the upkeep, and if they don't keep up their end of the bargain, we will have the opportunity to terminate it and return it to AEP.
I'm sure the neighbors will be watching. Thank you.
Anything else?
I think that's all.
Mr. Hill?
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Hillier.
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval.
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes. Resolution 2023-75 is adopted. There are no ordinances for third reading. We have one ordinance for second reading, ordinance number 2023-32. Mr. Hill?
Ordinance number 2023-32, an ordinance to create the positions of human resources interns and declaring an emergency.
And we'll give this ordinance its second reading and again, 10-minute committee meeting at the next meeting. We've come to the end of the ordinances. Remarks from administration. Mr. Interim Mayor, do you have anything to say over there?
I do not.
Thank you. Mr. Zick?
Yes, so council, this will be my last council meeting. I'll be moving on to a new opportunity before the September 11th meeting. Just want to say I've appreciated working with everybody, council, the mayor, our department heads who are phenomenal, and obviously the community as a whole. I think Mount Vernon's really moving forward, and I think it will continue to do so. I've worked on a transition plan with the mayor. Our departments, Mr. Reinhardt, all of our department heads are really keeping things running themselves. I don't see any real hiccups during this transition time. So thanks again. I'm sure I'll be following you guys from afar.
Mr. Brown?
I just want to thank Mr. Zick for his time here with us and wish him the best of luck in Huber Heights.
Mr. Scott?
Nothing further, Mrs. President Pro Tem.
Thank you, Terry. Mr. Mahan?
Thank you. I just want to welcome the college students back. I know we've had several already, athletes and such, to Kenyon, COTC, and Mount Vernon Nazarene, but the classes started today at the Mount Vernon University, and lots of activity, lots of life going on. I know that people will have noticed the uptick in activities, so welcome all the college students back. Want to say that I had the opportunity again to interact with some of the our Mount Vernon police officers last week and witness their interaction with the community. Just always pleased with how they work with our citizens and their attention to detail, the way they're doing things. So I just wanted to give them a shout out again. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Severns?
Yes, I just would like to say as well, congrats to Mr. Zick on his new opportunity at Hubert Heights. I wish you the best.
Thank you.
Mrs. Keener?
I would just like to say September 1st is the last first Friday of the year, and in my family, we like to recognize that as my daughter's birthday, so we're really thankful that Experience Mount Vernon decided to do that on her birthday. Also, on September 2nd, we are actually having our second annual First Responders softball game that will be at Memorial Park, and it starts at 10 o'clock in the morning. I would like to say thank you to our Safety Service Director for his time here. It would have been nice to have a little bit more heads up, but I don't think that we know all of the details about that transition. I do wish you luck in your next opportunity.
Mrs. Seavolt?
Thank you. I also want to wish you good luck, and I hope we can replace you.
You will.
Or we'll just move Bruce right over to the next chair.
You got anything to say now, Bruce?
Yeah, I was gonna say we'll just move him over there. That's all, thank you.
Mr. Ruckman?
Yeah, just thank you for everybody for being here. Also wish to congratulate you on that move, and thank you for your time, your talents, and just wish you Godspeed, and don't be a stranger.
I will.
No.
Mr. Hillier?
Thank you. Yes, I have a couple things. Mr. Hawkins, I talked to some of the other gentlemen in the room earlier today. With the heat, we'd like to extend our casual dress one more month. You have an issue with that?
I emailed you.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Up to council. Any objections to that?
I'm gonna dress up anyway, guys.
September,
Yeah.
fabulous.
All right, through September. Thank you. And I really don't care what you do about it next year. Vicki, thank you for coming. I know that we've talked many times, and I do answer those phone calls and those emails and talk to you at the store and aggravation. And I will say this, she may be the one that came to the podium, but she's not the only one that has an issue what's going on there. And I appreciate her speaking for the neighbors. I have seen it. I did drive it over the weekend. It is a mud hole. You can start to feel where the alley's starting to get rough. And I don't know what the protocol is, and about answering emails, returning phone calls, and those type of things. Mel, I saw an email from you. And we've talked about it. I mean, Bruce has mentioned it before, the lack of information coming to us. And I hate to see that. I mean, there's 7 of us, that's our problem, but I think we need to get back to the constituents, the people that pay the wages, and make sure, if she's blowing smoke, tell her, be done with it. And say in the next email, we've settled this, but at least we've got to make sure we're answering our phone calls, whether it's about referencing the buildings over here we want to tear down or whatever that is. We've got to make sure we stay on top of it. Thank you. Mr. Mahan, I was listening to the chief, and it brought something to mind, and maybe something you could work with him on. And it's something I've talked about several times. Several times. I was also part of the one that formed this ordinance. We have a nuisance ordinance in the city of Mount Vernon. And I think Mr. Zick knows what I'm talking about. I know Mr. Brewer knows what I'm talking about. We've met with them. We've met over here. We've met with the mayor. We've met with the chief. And basically the ordinance is about drug activity and where it's at and how often it happens. And I know that we said, well, it's hard maybe to enforce, or well, maybe this, well, maybe that. I have 8 meetings left. And when we talk about drug activity, maybe it's something that you and Chief Morgan can come up with. And it doesn't have to be by next meeting. I would like to know how much of this is reoccurring in the same apartment complexes. That'd be one owner. Same houses, the same rentals, owned by the same renter. Because there's liability there. And we have in an ordinance what we can do if we keep having a recurring problem over and over and over. And I can tell you this, I see a squad of police quite often going to one spot on Coshocton Avenue. So if you would follow that up, if that ordinance isn't any good, maybe you can work with the law director and get rid of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I had one positive. I was contacted by actually several people who appreciated our flashing speed signs that we put on the poles around town. They're appreciating seeing those out again. So whoever's doing that, will you please tell them thank you. I want to thank the media for being here, and I will take a call to adjourn our meeting.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.